Today we're diving into the story of a true visionary, a 19th-century countess who looked at a machine made of brass and gears and somehow saw our digital future. Let's get into the incredible mind of Ada Lovelace. You know, we hear this title all the time, Ada Lovelace, the first computer programmer. And look, that's an amazing title, but what if we're missing the point? What if the algorithm she wrote wasn't even the main story? What if her real, honest-to-goodness legacy was something way, way bigger?
To really get her, you have to start with her childhood, which is this fascinating clash of two completely opposite worlds.
So on one side, you've got the DNA of her famous father, the poet Lord Byron. We're talking pure imagination, big, abstract ideas. But her mother was terrified of that poetic madness, so she pushed Ada's education in the total opposite direction: cold, hard, logical certainty, science and mathematics. This collision of poetry and logic created something unique, a mindset that Ada herself called poetical science. And honestly, that phrase perfectly sums up her genius.
And it was this one-of-a-kind brain that was perfectly primed for a meeting that would change everything.
When she was just 17, Ada met the brilliant inventor, Charles Babbage. He showed her his blueprints for a crazy new machine called the Analytical Engine, and for her, it was love at first sight. Babbage was just blown away by how quickly and deeply she understood his work. He even gave her this perfect nickname, the Enchantress of Number.
Okay, to really appreciate what she saw, you gotta understand the basics of this machine. First up is the mill. Just think of it as the engine's brain. It's basically the 19th century mechanical version of the CPU that's sitting in your computer or phone right now.
And then you had the store. This is where the machine held all the numbers it was working on. It was, for all intents and purposes, the world's first mechanical computer memory. It was RAM, made of gears. So how do you tell this thing what to do? With these, punched cards. Babbage actually got the idea from textile looms that used cards with holes to weave super complex patterns into fabric. Each set of holes was a different instruction. This was it. This was literally the world's first software.
So with this incredible machine just existing as a concept, remember, it wasn't even built yet, Ada Lovelace sits down and produces her most important work.
So, in 1843, she's asked to translate an article written in Italian about Babbage's engine. But she didn't just translate it, oh no. She added her own thoughts, her own analysis, which she humbly called her notes. And get this, her notes ended up being 3 times longer than the original article she was translating, and 1,000 times more important.
Tucked away in these notes, in a section she labeled Note G, she described a detailed, step-by-step process for how the engine could calculate a really complex series of numbers. This wasn't just a math problem, it was a complete set of instructions for a machine, covering things like loops, storing data, and retrieving it. It is, without a doubt, the world's first published computer algorithm.
But, and this is the big turn in our story, as incredible as that algorithm was, it wasn't the point. Not really.
See, you have to understand, the algorithm wasn't the masterpiece. It was the proof. It was her way of showing everyone in black and white, look, this crazy theoretical machine, we can actually control it. We can give it orders and it will follow them.
Because that proof opened the door to a much bigger idea. Her vision for what that machine could become, now that was the revolution. She saw something so much bigger than a fancy calculator. And here it is, her own words from way back in 1843. She realized that if the machine can manipulate numbers, and numbers are just symbols, then it could be programmed to manipulate any kind of symbol, like musical notes, or letters, or anything. She was describing a general-purpose computer, a machine that could create art. This leap from just calculating to actually composing, that's the core of her genius.
So how do we tie all this together? Let's take a look at how her 19th century ideas are still shaping our world right now.
All right, let's break down the takeaways. First, yes, the first algorithm, the absolute blueprint for how we tell machines what to do. But second, and I'd argue more importantly, her vision of general-purpose computing, the idea that a computer could handle anything, not just numbers. And finally, she was the first person to even ask the big questions about the limits of what we now call artificial intelligence.
And she was incredibly clear about this. She wrote that the machine has no pretensions whatever to originate anything. It can only do what we know how to tell it to do.
It can follow orders flawlessly, but it can't come up with the orders itself. It can't think.
And that leaves us with this massive, fascinating question for our time. Back in 1843, Ada Lovelace drew a line in the sand, the boundary between a tool and a true creator. Now, with generative AI that can paint pictures, compose music, write stories, we have to ask ourselves, have we finally, after all this time, proven her wrong? Or are we just getting a whole lot better at ordering the machine what to perform?